There isn't a person in this building I couldn't have. I own the building. Usually, I own them too. Jang Tae-min said it without turning around, still watching the stage through the blue haze of his club, and the young woman clearing glasses beside his table froze, because he was talking to her, and because she'd been about to walk away without a word, which was the whole problem. Simone Vaughn set the tray down. Then you don't need me to fetch your drink. You can have someone who wants to. That got him to look at her. Up close, she wasn't what Blue Hour usually put in front of him. No practiced smile, no angle worked for his benefit, just steady, dark eyes and the faint ink stain on her fingers from writing her sister's set list an hour before it went out under the lights. On stage, Kiara Vaughn had held 200 people in her palm and never once looked away from the room. Simone had spent the whole night in the wings, and Tae-min, who could have watched the headliner, had spent it watching the girl who didn't want to be seen. "You wrote the last song," he said. "The slow one." "How would you know that?" "Because your sister sang it like a performance. You'd have sung it like it happened to you." He tilted his head. "It did, didn't it?" Simone picked the tray back up. "I clear tables, Mr. Jang. That's the arrangement." "Sit." "No." The word landed in the space between them and just stayed there. Around the club, people moved and laughed and spent money they'd regret, and none of them noticed that the man who ran the district had just been told no by a woman holding a tray of empty glasses. Something behind his face sharpened. Not offense, interest, sudden and real, the first honest thing he'd felt all night. "You know who I am," he said quietly. "Everyone does. That's usually enough for people. But not you. I've got a sister to look after and a room to close. I don't have room to be impressed." He let her go. He watched her walk the length of the club, watched her not look back once, and that was the thing. That was exactly the thing. Every door in this place opened when he came near. Hers had shut in his face, politely, completely, without a crack of light under it. Across the room, Kiara caught his eye from the bar and lifted her glass to him, warm and certain, sure the attention still hanging in the air was hers to hold. Tae-min raised his glass back. He even smiled. But he was already turning to find her sister in the crowd, and he didn't stop looking until he found her. The offer came in an envelope no one else at Blue Hour ever received. A headline residency, 3 years, a number on the contract that made Kiara press a hand to her mouth in the dressing room mirror. 3 years, she kept saying. "Simone, do you understand what he's giving us? Do you understand what a man like that giving us anything means?" Simone understood exactly what it meant, and that was why she hadn't touched the pen. "Read the last page," she said. Kiara read it, and her face changed. The contract didn't bind the headliner. It bound the songwriter. Every clause that mattered, the exclusivity, the standing weekly meetings, the requirement that new material be reviewed in person by ownership, pointed at Simone, and only Simone, like a finger held an inch from her chest. "It's a formality," Kiara said, but the certainty had thinned. It wasn't a formality. Simone learned that the following Tuesday, when a car she hadn't called came for her, and she was brought up to an office above the club to discuss a set list that did not need discussing. Tae-min was at the window when she came in. He didn't offer her a seat this time. He knew she wouldn't take it. You could have emailed the changes, she said. I could have, he turned. I wanted to hear you argue them. You fight for a bridge in a song the way most people fight for their lives. It's the only time you forget to be careful around me. I'm being careful now. I noticed. Sit anyway. She stayed standing. He crossed the room slowly, the way he did everything, and stopped near enough that she could see he'd read the songs. Really read them. Margins full of his handwriting. Small, precise notes beside the lines she'd bled over at 3 a.m. It unsettled her more than any threat could have. Threats she knew how to close a door on. Why me? She said. Kiara's the voice. Kiara's the reason the room fills. You're building a residency around the sister nobody's paying to see. Because your sister performs for the room, he said, and you perform for no one. I've spent my whole life around people who arrange themselves the second I walk in. He was close now, quiet, unhurried. You don't arrange. You don't perform. You just decide I'm not worth the effort. And you keep deciding it, over and over. And I can't stop thinking about the moment you're wrong. Don't hold your breath. I never do. He stepped back and returned to the desk, the meeting over as suddenly as it began. Same time next week. Bring the second verse. It isn't finished and you know it. Downstairs, Kiara was waiting by the stage in a new dress, glowing, certain the summons had really been about her, certain the money and the flowers and the man's endless patience were the beginning of something with her name on it. Simone looked at her sister's hope and felt the floor tilt. She said nothing. She'd already learned there were some doors you didn't dare open. Not for the man, and not for the sister who loved him. He came down to the floor on a Friday, which he never did. Blue Hour had a man that night. Some investor from Seoul, with a loud table and looser hands. The kind of guest management usually smiled through. He'd been watching Simone since she came out to reset the piano between sets, and by her third pass, he caught her wrist and said something low that made her go still. She handled it. She always handled it. She pulled free, kept her face flat, kept walking. She didn't see Tae-min until he was already there. He didn't raise his voice. He never did. He simply appeared at the loud man's table, rested one hand on the back of the chair, and said something no one else could hear. The investor's color drained. Within a minute, he and his whole party were on their feet, apologizing to a man who hadn't asked for an apology. And within 2, they were gone, the table cleared, the night rearranged around a thing that had lasted 90 seconds. The club exhaled and went back to its noise. Only Simone had watched his face while he did it, and there'd been nothing protective in it. It wasn't a man defending a woman. It was a man removing someone who'd touched something that belonged to him. He found her by the service door. You didn't have to do that, she said. I had it. I know you had it. He was too close again, the blue light catching the edge of his jaw. I did it because I wanted to. Because for 1 second, another man put his hand where I've spent 2 weeks not letting myself. Her breath caught, and she hated that it caught. You don't own me. A contract for songs isn't... I know exactly what the contract is. His voice dropped. I wrote it. I know it doesn't touch you. That's the part I can't stand. That the only thing in this city I actually want is the one thing the paper doesn't give me. For a moment, neither of them moved. The music swelled behind the door, some old standard, and his eyes went to her mouth and stayed there long enough that she felt the whole room narrow to the 6 inches between them. He didn't close it. He let it hang, deliberate, letting her feel how easy it would be and how much he wanted her to be the one to break first. She stepped back. He let her, this time. A small, dangerous smile touched his face, like a man who'd learned something he could use. Across the floor, Kiara had seen the end of it, seen him lean toward her sister, seen the intensity of it from a distance that erased all the words. She read it the only way her hope would let her. He's warning her off. He's protecting the family. For me. She came over glowing, took Simone's arm, and whispered, "He's falling for me. I can feel it." Simone looked at her sister's shining face and felt the first crack open under her own feet. She smiled and said nothing. It started over a dress. Kiara had bought it for the anniversary gala Blue Hour threw every year, the one night the district's whole shadow world came to drink under one roof. And she'd bought it because she was certain, finally, that tonight was the night he'd make it plain. She stood in the dressing room, turning in front of the mirror, and she said, warm and sure, "I think I'm going to tell him how I feel." Simone's hands went still on the set list. "Don't," she said, before she could stop it. Kiara turned. "Why not?" And Simone had nothing to give her that wasn't the truth, so she gave her silence, and silence was the wrong answer. Kiara's face moved through confusion into something colder as the last 3 weeks rearranged themselves behind her eyes. The private car, the office meetings, the 90 seconds it took a man to empty a table. All of it she'd hung her name on, all of it turning to point somewhere else. "It's you," Kiara said, quiet, disbelieving. "This whole time, it was never me. I never wanted it. Kiara, I have never once. You didn't have to want it." Her voice cracked down the middle. "You just had to be the one he couldn't have. And you let me stand here for a month, planning what to say to a man who's been looking straight through me at my little sister." She left before Simone could reach her. Simone found him because she needed to end it, went up to the office, half to fix her sister's heart and half furious. And the fury was the mistake, because fury was the one thing that made her forget to keep the door shut. "Fix this," she said. "Tell her it's her. Lie. She's my sister, and you're breaking her over something she never even had." Tae-min came around the desk. "I won't lie to her." "Then leave us alone. Tear up the contract, keep the money, I don't care." "Simone." He was close now, and the anger in her had burned off her careful distance, and for the first time she was near him without a wall up, breathing hard, close enough that the space between them went thin and charged. His hand came up and stopped just short of her face. "Tell me you feel nothing," he said, low. "Say it once, and I'll believe you, and I'll let you both go." She meant to. She opened her mouth to. She didn't. His thumb brushed her jaw, barely, and her eyes fell shut, and he leaned in until she could feel the warmth of him a breath away from her mouth. The dressing room door slammed 2 floors down, loud enough to reach them. Simone pulled back like she'd been burned, one hand pressed to her own lips, horror and want warring in her face. Tae-min didn't move, didn't hide anything, just looked at her with quiet certainty. "There it is," he said softly. "Now we both know." Kiara didn't come home that night. She didn't come to the club the next evening either, and the one after that, her spot on the bill went dark for the first time in 3 years. Simone found her on the 4th day at their mother's old apartment, sitting on the floor with her back against the couch. And the sight of her, no stage light, no armor, just her sister, hollowed out, broke something loose in Simone's chest. "I turned him down," Simone said. "Every time. I never wanted him. I swear to you, I fought it." "I know." Kiara's voice was raw and quiet, all the fight gone out of it. "That's the worst part. You didn't even try, and he still picked you." She wiped her face. "I built a whole life in my head on a man who was never looking at me. How do you come back from being that stupid over someone?" They cried together on the floor like they were girls again, and by morning something had healed. Not all the way, but enough. Enough that Kiara held Simone's face in both hands and said, "If it's real, then be honest with him. Don't waste it protecting my pride. I'll survive. We'll survive. We always do." It was the bravest thing Simone had ever seen her sister do. She went to Blue Hour that night to tell him the truth, that she was done fighting it, done pretending the door had ever really stayed shut. She felt light for the first time in weeks. She found the club half empty and strange, staff moving quietly, and in his office, Tae-min was not alone. There was a man there she didn't know, older, expensively still, the kind of stillness that made Tae-min's own look borrowed. And beside him, a young woman in pale silk who sat with the composure of someone raised knowing exactly what she was worth. "Miss Vaughn," Tae-min said, and his voice had changed, flattened, formal. "We're finishing here." "I'll wait outside." "No, stay. You should hear it from me and not from a rumor." He came around the desk, and he didn't come close, didn't let anything into his face. "This is Chairman Ha and his daughter. Our families have an understanding that goes back longer than Blue Hour has existed. The marriage was always going to happen. I let myself forget that for a few weeks. That was careless of me." The floor went out from under her. "You said," she started and stopped, because her own voice frightened her. "In the dressing room, you said now we both know." "We do know." Something flickered behind his eyes and was gone. "I know what I wanted, and I know I was never going to be allowed to keep it." The chairman's daughter watched all of this with mild, incurious eyes, a woman witnessing a transaction being finalized. Simone stood in the doorway of the office where he'd told her she performed for no one, where he'd read her songs in the margins, where he'd said the only thing he wanted was the thing the paper didn't give him, and she understood, too late, that she'd been the one thing a man like him could afford to want, precisely because he was never going to be allowed to have her. "Then why?" she whispered. "Why do any of it? Why chase me at all?" Tae-min looked at her for a long moment. "Because I could," he said. He married her 3 weeks later. Simone didn't go, but the whole district talked about it. The Ha girl in white, the two families joined at last. Jang Tae-min standing at the front of a room full of powerful men with that same smile that never once reached his eyes. He looked, everyone said, entirely at peace, like a man who had never wanted a single thing he couldn't sign for. He closed Blue Hour to the sisters the way he did everything, cleanly and without a word. The residency dissolved, the contract voided. A severance arrived that was almost obscene in its size. Money instead of an apology, because a man like him didn't keep apologies, only figures. Simone left the envelope unopened on the counter for a month, unable to touch it and unable to send it back, because sending it back would mean speaking to him, and speaking to him was the one thing she still, God help her, wanted to do. He never called, never wrote. There was no letter, no last look across a crowded room, because nothing in him needed the last word. He had wanted a thing he was never allowed to keep, and the moment it stopped being his to want, he set it down like an empty glass and did not think of it again. That was the wound that wouldn't close. Not that he'd chosen someone else, that there had never been a choice. Simone lay awake tracing the weeks backward, every meeting, every margin note in his handwriting, the 90 seconds it took him to empty a table for her, and she understood now that all of it had cost him nothing. She had been the shut door he chased for the shape of the wanting, and when it closed for good, he simply stopped standing in front of it. She had loved a man who'd felt, at most, curiosity, and it had nearly hollowed her out. They left Incheon before winter, to a smaller city with no blue light. Kiara sang, Simone wrote. But the songs came slower now and sadder, and some of them Kiara couldn't finish, her voice breaking on lines that had once been about hope. On the worst nights, the sisters sat in the dark of a rented room and didn't speak at all, each of them privately certain she would never be wanted like that again, and privately terrified that she would. Kiara stopped talking about the future. Simone stopped writing about it. They had each other, and it was not nothing, but it was not enough to fill the room some nights, and they knew it, and they didn't say it. Jang Tae-min went on to own more of the city than his father ever had. He never once looked back, because looking back would mean he had lost something. He hadn't. Only the two sisters had, and they carried it quietly, for a long, long time. The way you carry a thing that never learns how to stop aching.